Hi, my name's Brad. I'm with GoCode Overland, lead upholsterer. Today, we're going to talk about upholstering the center overhead Ds, as these can be a little bit cumbersome, but very doable with just a little bit of instruction. Let's start out first with some of the materials that we're going to need to do this. I like using Tensor Grip P307. This has a low VOC account, and it does hold up pretty good to temperature changes and works with the humidity pretty well. The other type of glue that we're going to be using very sparsely today is just some good contact cement. Weldwood is what I like using. You can get this at Lowe's or just about anywhere. Obviously going to need some cutting tools. I like using a good box cutter with a fresh blade. 1 to 2 pairs of scissors, small and big. Make sure these are good and sharp. Some of the other things that we're going to be using today is some blue tape to control where our glue goes with overspray. And if you don't have this, I recommend it. This is Taylor's chalk that disappears with heat. If you don't have this, that's okay. Blue tape will suffice. Obviously, with using any type of glue or aerosol, you want to make sure and mask up. PPE is a big deal. Particulate mask is okay, but I really recommend using a vapor mask with a carbon activated filter. You also want to make sure and do this in an open space so that you have good ventilation. Lastly, one of the most important tools that can also be problematic at times, but also your friend, is a good heat gun. We'll talk about this later. You want to be careful with that. All right, next, we're going to talk about what to do in preparation for gluing. So you want to make sure that your ABS plastic is free of oil, dirt, or any particulate matter that would impede the adhesion process. I like to use a automotive prep cleaner. Anything with any type of astringent like alcohol or even Windex I've used before. Any type of degreaser. You just want to make sure and get this nice and clean. No dirt, no grease. So in spraying this, I usually start with the back side, and I do about a 1-inch fan all the way down the back of this, all the way down around the side, up the side, and I do not spray any type of adhesive or anything on this flange right here because I'm not wrapping the fabric around there. We want to make sure that this sticks to the vehicle nice, so having a layer of fabric or anything in there may impede that. Don't forget to mask up when you do this, and then also I've got paper on my workspace here because we are going to get some overspray. We don't want to gum up our workspace. So mask on, give your glue a little bit of a shake. And I always do a little bit of a test spray off on the side to make sure that my nozzle's not clogged and I don't get glue everywhere. All right, a couple things before we move on to gluing the fabric. If you've noticed, I didn't apply any glue on either of these curved edges of the center overhead D here. And that is because later on, we're gonna be doing what's called a folded over seam. Some people call it a dart, other people call it a hamper in the upholstery business. I call it a folded over seam. And we don't wanna glue this because we're gonna be flopping the fabric back and forth in order to establish that folded seam. So we will glue this part later. Also, where the buttonholes are, where the hardware goes, I did apply a little bit of extra glue there so that we can get that fabric down in there and have proper adhesion. I did 2 coats. Usually does it good if you go different ways. Hit it from different directions and that glue will be able to impregnate the hair cell and the texture of this, allowing for proper adhesion. So next, we'll show you how to glue up the fabric. All right, next, we're gonna move on to gluing up the fabric. So I'm starting out with a piece of fabric pre-cut, and what I find comfortable to work within this piece of fabric cut around 80 inches by 2 foot. Don't be afraid to waste a little bit of fabric. The worst thing to do is to go through this process get close to the end of your upholstery and be an inch short. So overcutting your fabric is okay. Want to make sure and wear your PPE. And then also, I've got a new piece of paper set down so that I'm not getting any overspray from our last spray up onto the face side of our fabric. Once again, I like to hit this from 2 different directions, a little left to right, a little up and down. I find that 2 coats does the best. All right, now that we've got our plastic and our fabric glued up, you do want to make sure and let that vape off for about 5 to 10 minutes to get rid of VOC and any gas that may be in there. We want to make sure that this is just slightly tacky. If you try to attach the glue before it gets tacky, it's not going to work and it's going to come off of the parent materials and try to start sticking to itself. Just make sure and let this vape off for about 5 to 10 minutes, which we've already done here. So the first thing that we want to do is take our piece and get it centered on our fabric. You can measure that out if you wish, or just eyeball it, but we want to be equidistant on both sides. About a hand's width. And then also I am registering the flange of the overhead D here about 1.5 to 2 inches from the edge of the fabric. That's going to allow us to be able to manipulate it the way we need to, get it tucked up into that flange. So I'm staying parallel with the edge of the fabric, equidistant on both ends. Once you get that registered, we're going to take our hands up underneath the fabric and start sticking it to the piece. I'm going to start with the very edge of the flange. Once I get that registered where I want to, we're going to flip the piece over and really get into making this stick. So just sticking this right now to the edge of the flange. I'm going to get my hands up under there and apply a little bit of pressure to the middle of the piece here where it's flat, and give it a little bit of a rub all the way down both sides. And all we're doing right now is just getting the piece registered. Now we flip over. I'm adhered right here and it's stuck pretty good. But what I'm gonna do first here is start working the fabric down into this crevice where the body of the piece meets the flange. During this process, you wanna make sure and avoid any air bubbles, any gaps in between the fabric and the plastic. I'm not pressing real hard right now in case if I mess up, I'm gonna be able to peel that off later. If you need to, take that fabric, pull it up a little bit, and really work fabric down into that crease of where the flange is. All the way to the edge. And once I have that fabric tucked down into that crevice where the flange meets the body, start working it onto the flange itself. If this gets rough on your hands, you can always use a tool like a putty knife or a Bondo spreader, anything like that that has an edge to it but not too sharp to cut or damage the fabric. There is a bit of a bump out on the plastic right here, kind of shaped like a rectangle. I want to make sure that I'm getting down into all the crevices around that as well. Now, if you remember earlier, we didn't apply any glue to the edge of the plastic here where it curves. That's okay. We're going to work on that seam here in just a little bit. But for right now, what I'm focusing on is bringing this excess material, stretching it out a little bit, and wrapping it around the rest of the piece. I usually start right here in the middle, work my way toward the ends. So pulling it taut with one hand, taking the other hand, working the wrinkles out in the fabric, making sure that there's not any gaps, any air bubbles, or any creases. As you're coming around this curve of the piece right here, do not forget that there are buttonholes for the hardware. We want to make sure, take your thumb or any other type of object and really work that fabric down into that divot. If you have to pull it back a little bit, that's okay. I do like keeping this nice and taut so that I can stretch it with my thumb and get it down into that divot nice. There's 4 of these on the piece. Don't forget about those. We don't want to cover those up. Shouldn't get in a rush with any of this. Take your time. Like a lot of things, the faster we go, the easier it is to make mistakes. I'm always checking for gaps in between the fabric and the plastic. No wrinkles, no air bubbles. Okay, the next thing that we want to pay attention to here are the holes for the door closure. We've got 2 long slits right here, and you just want to take your thumb. You can even use a Sharpie marker, the end of it, any type of tool if your hands get tired, and really work that fabric down into that hole right there. There's 2, make sure and do both. In pushing that fabric down into that hole, that's going to give us room to trim it off later and wrap it around the edge. Once you have these 2 parts done, just a matter of working this all the way down to the sides as much as you can, and we will address this part next. All right, now we're ready to address the ends with folded seam. All right, next I'm going to show you how to tackle the edge of the piece here where our folded seam is. So I have taken the fabric as far as I can, and I've wrapped it all the way around the edge here. And I've taken it as far as I can up here to the corner of where this flange is. And what we want to end up with here is about a 45-degree angle of the fabric coming around a piece of plastic and terminating right just after the radius of this piece right here. So in order to get this fabric to fold over, what we're going to have to do is make a relief cut here, and we're going to have to make a relief cut here in the fabric to allow it to do so. You want to make sure you got a good sharp pair of scissors to do this. And from the edge of the fabric here to the corner of where the flange meets the body of the piece, we're going to make a cut. We want to end that cut just about an 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch from the edge. Just make sure and don't cut into the fabric where it's going to cover the body. I'm going to flip it over and do the same process right here. Oftentimes I will fold the fabric or crease it just a little bit, make sure it's good and taut. We're going to make our cut from the edge all the way up to just shy of an 1/8 inch of plastic. What this is going to allow us to do is take this fabric, fold it over, and the excess fabric that won't traverse the topography will be caught within the seam right here. In order to set this seam, I'm grabbing all the way from the edge and pulling it taut. Tension will happen on this cut, and tension will happen up here on the top. Give it a little tug a couple times, and it's just going to live where the tension stops. It's at this time that I will very gently, very slowly apply a little bit of pressure and start setting this folded over seam so that the fabric is being glued to itself here. As you come around the curve, we want to make sure that this fabric is pulled nice and tight right here so that it follows the curve of the piece. And as always, whenever we're committing our fabric to itself or fabric to the plastic, we are working out bubbles, we're working out wrinkles, we're working out folds, as we don't want those. The difficult part here is getting this fabric to lay down where this curves. And that just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of attention, and playing with the fabric. I'm not pressing the fabric down really hard yet to the plastic. I don't really want to commit it all the way. Once I get it where I want to, then we'll go back, apply a generous amount of pressure, and really get it to commit to our plastic. The overall shape of this folded seam is kind of like an elongated diamond. It's going to terminate on points very sharply, and in the middle, it's going to be a little bit wider. I usually go for about 2 inches here in the middle and terminating to a 0 point on the ends. Now this is why we did not apply glue here yet, because going back and forth, folding this over, and actually working it from the underside of the fabric with your hands will allow you to see where you need to be and allow you to feel for any gaps, air bubbles, or folds in the fabric that we don't want. I try to take that up about as far as I can, about where the glue stopped. Give it a little bit of a rub, slightly commit it to its position, and then we fold this back over and start working the fabric out here, just committing a little bit of memory to it so that when we glue it, it already knows where to go. I'll show you a close-up on this. We're going to repeat this process on both sides. Okay folks, I want to give you a close-up view here of this. So as you can see, here's our folded seam. It goes to about 1 inch, 1.5 inches in the middle, and like I was saying, terminates to a 0 point right about here in the corner of where the flange meets the body of the plastic. If you follow this around, it also terminates to a 0 point right here at the edge of the plastic, right at the start of the radius of this curve right here. Really making sure that this is committed to itself. Go ahead and give that a good rub. Squeeze that down. And what we have here is fabric sticking to fabric. We're going to go back later, lift this up, and put some contact cement in there. But for now, we're going to work on gluing the fabric to the plastic where we did not apply glue earlier. So once again, you want to make sure and have your mask on. Make sure you've got paper on your work surface because we are going to get some overspray here. I do peel this back just a little bit right here to make sure that I'm getting glue all the way into the plastic where the fabric's covering it up. So peeling this back just a little to where the fabric is sticking to itself. And once again, I do like gluing in 2 different directions. 2 coats allows for proper adhesion. And just as before, anytime that we do glue, we want to let this vape off for about 5 to 10 minutes and let it get just a little bit tacky for proper adhesion. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. right, now that we've got this glued up on both surfaces here, and we have the other side done as well, I'm going to show you how to commit the fabric to this curve right here. It's always good to get your hand up under there and double check for any gaps, folds, wrinkles. And most of the time, a good general rule in upholstery is to start with the hardest parts first. Obviously, the hard part right here is going to be where this curve is. So I get my hand up under there. I'm going to start working that fabric from this edge and up around this radius right here. You're going to take your time, go slow, moving fast, easier to make mistakes. It's at this point, I can't really go too much further. As you can see, the fabric's starting to stretch and wrinkle. Now this is a method I like to call a pullover. It's kind of the opposite of putting a sock on. Think about taking a sock off. So what we're gonna do is roll and pull this fabric up right here. It's gonna do two things. It's gonna get the fabric there, but then also in that process, it's gonna stretch it at the same time. Having a little bit of fingernail helps with this. So we really wanna grip this fabric right here and start rolling it up the side. You're gonna feel a little bit of resistance, but that's okay. The fabric is actually stretching while you do this. So I'm just kind of grabbing it with my fingernails and pulling it up this side right here around this curve. Once you get to about here, you'll feel it having resistance, and that's coming from this part. So it's at this point, I will do the same thing. I'll roll over, grabbing it with my fingernails, pulling it up the piece, and it's stretching it while we do this. Do a little on this side. When you start to feel tension building, come over here, do a little bit on this side. Once you get that to the edge, go ahead and kind of fold that over a little bit. And what I'm really checking for right here is to make sure that I have no wrinkles, no gaps in between the fabric and the plastic. And if you're happy with that, go ahead and rub this down aggressively and really commit that. If you're not happy with it and you've got some wrinkles or some funky things going on with your fabric right here, before committing, you can peel this off a little bit and rework that if you need to. If you find yourself pulling this off more than twice, you probably want to reapply glue. Since I've only done it once, I feel like that's okay. Always inspecting your work as you go along before you really commit it down. Right here on the edge of the piece, there is a recessed shelf for the flange. You do want to make sure and get the fabric stuck down in there really well. Apply a little bit of pressure. I really get in there with my fingernail. You can also always use another tool like a putty spreader or butter knife even can work. And really want to see a defined edge along there so that the vertical D's can slide into that flange and connect appropriately. This is how we want it looking. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. All right, so now that we have fabric wrapped around the edge and our seam set, we're gonna go ahead and get rid of a lot of this excess fabric and get that out of the way. So in wrapping the fabric around, I like to leave about 1.5 or 2 inches all the way around the perimeter of the piece. So I'm gonna go ahead and make some cuts and trim that up. I'm going to pull that fabric tight as we're making that cut, and we're just following the edge, staying about 1 to 2 inches away from the edge of the plastic right here. We're going to do this all the way around. I'm going to make some 45-degree cuts in the corners. And on this corner as well, 45 all the way across. And once again, I'm staying about 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch away from the edge on the corners. Do the same thing right here, 45. In the middle, right here, I'm gonna cut a large triangle. In upholstery and wrapping, triangles are gonna be your friend. What that allows us to do is to fold this over, stick it to the glue, and as you can see, that 45 allows the fabric not to bunch over on top of itself. Same thing here. I'm gonna think about it kind of like wrapping a Christmas present. Now along this curve, fabric is gonna bunch, which we don't want. So once again, cutting triangles in this area right here will allow you to fold the fabric over without bunching up on top of itself. So we do that by cutting a series of triangles. Anytime you're traversing a curved edge, this is what you want to do. We're going to do this all the way to our relief cut that we made earlier. And 45 in that corner. Got a little bit of excess fabric peeking out at the end. Trim that off, and the heat gun will take care of that later. When you have a straight run here, no triangles are necessary, but if you see in the corner, once again, cutting that 45 and the triangle in there allows that fabric to not sit on top of itself and to make good contact with the plastic and the glue. So there we are with that. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. All right, next we're gonna be trimming off this area right here, getting rid of all this excess fabric. Once again, we wanna make our cut about 1 to 2 inches away from the edge of the plastic so that it adheres right to the inside against the glue. I'm pulling this taut. And just a straight cut all the way across. Get rid of this, and we'll fold this over. And one thing that we do want to make sure here is that the fabric that we wrapped around is not covering up these slots where the door latches go. If it is, just trim that back a little bit. All right, next what we want to do is get rid of this excess fabric along the flange all the way from the right to left of the piece. And we did not put any glue here in the beginning, if you remember, because I do not like gluing this around the flange. You may if you want to, but we really want this part to seat up against the ceiling of the van as good as possible. So having fabric in there may get in the way. The way I like to do this really nice and clean is with a fresh blade and a box cutter, and simply just inserting it here in the middle, and running it down the edge. Gives you a nice, good, quick, clean cut all the way down. And then on the very edge, I have a little bit hanging off right here. I'll just take the scissors and trim that off. All right, next we're going to be addressing the folded seam all along this corner right here. So what we want to do is open this up, and we're going to be putting contact cement inside of this and folding it back down to make sure that that adheres to the fabric itself and doesn't come off later on in your travels. One way to do this is to use tailor's chalk. This is a very special product. When you apply heat to it, it disappears. So what we want to do is mark this area right up against that folded seam. So that when we open this joint up, we peel this back, we now have a line visible of where to apply our glue. Don't want to get glue onto the show part of the piece here. So I do recommend staying actually just inside of this line a little bit. If you don't have magic disappearing tailor's chalk, what you can do is just use tape and go all along this edge and tape off that edge so that you're not getting any glue onto the showpiece of the fabric. Either way works. I really like using this. I'm going to go ahead and roll with this and show you. Definitely want to shake your glue up, mix it up real good, especially if it's been sitting there for a long time. And give this a really good stir to make sure that this is good and mixed up so it works properly. I'm really taking my time and going slow here. I don't want to drip glue anywhere. I don't want to get it on any show part of the fabric. If you have masked this off with tape, you can use spray glue right here, but you would also want to mask this area off as well. I don't really recommend that, but it is possible. So right now we're just applying this onto this surface, and I'm staying shy of that line so I don't get onto the showpiece. Applying glue to one surface. And then I'm also applying glue to this surface as well. Keeping in mind that this is contact cement and it works on the principle of contact with both surfaces. Now, just like our spray glue, when I do apply this, I want to allow it to vape off and get tacky for about 5 to 10 minutes. If you try to fold this over and adhere that to itself without it being tacky, it's not going to stick. One way that you can expedite this process a little bit is to use the heat gun or set it by a fan, but you really do want to give this a little bit of time to set up. While this is setting up, I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. Once again, you can use tape to mark your edge. I'm going to use the tailor's chalk. If you are using tailor's chalk, you want to make sure and get the kind that disappears with heat. I'll show you that here in just a moment. Pretty amazing product. Okay, now that we have that area marked, we can go ahead and fold this back. Stir your glue good. And apply to both surfaces. Now also, once again, I'm staying on the inside of my marked line in an attempt not to get any glue on the showpiece. If you do happen to get glue on the showpiece, I do recommend trying to get that off as soon as possible. Don't let that set up. Try to get it off as soon as you can. And using something with a little bit of an astringent quality, such as rubbing alcohol, I find works just fine. Acetone or anything else is a little bit too strong, and that will actually melt the plastic fibers that is in our marathon tweed here. So applying glue to both surfaces here. Usually give it about 2 coats. And once again, I want to let that set up, get tacky, and let that dry. We're going to go back to the other side, and I'm going to show you how using the heat gun and the tailor's chalk works. I like to keep my heat gun on a low setting. I like to sit there and let it warm up for just a little bit first. So this is going to do 2 things. This is going to help cure contact cement, and it's also going to get rid of our mark that we made earlier. If you watch carefully here, it's pretty cool. It's going to disappear. Now, the heat gun is a very useful tool, but can also melt the fabric. You don't want to let it get too hot, and you want to keep the heat gun moving. If you let it set in one spot, you're going to take a risk of burning and melting the fabric. Now, as you can see, our mark line is slowly disappearing with the application of a little bit of heat. If you did use the tape, I recommend removing the tape first before you put any heat on it. And that heat is definitely helping the curing process of the glue. Keeping it moving. And the other side. And watch carefully, and this line's going to disappear. After a little bit of time and a little bit of heat, you can touch that, see if it feels tacky. It should not stick to your finger. That's how you know it's ready. This feels pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this back over. If you have any excess glue that seeps out, go ahead and get rid of that as soon as you can. And with a little bit of pressure and a massage, we get that folded seam stuck over and committed to where it wants to be. Do the same thing on the other side. I do recommend going back at the end of this project and really working that seam over and make sure that that's sticking to itself really well, and then it's nice and folded over right there. All right, next I'm going to show you how to do these buttonholes. Do the slots for the door latch, how to finish this off and clean it up real good. Okay, next I want to show you how to trim up these indentions for the slots for the door latch. So once again, having a good fresh blade in your box cutter works here, and we're just going to make an incision from right to left and then 2 45s in each of these corners where the radius is. So just right in the middle, punch through, drag it down. Make sure you go all the way to the edge. And it's at this point where I do a 45 in this corner, 45 in this corner, and this corner as well. Now what that does is that allows this to open up and allow the fabric to wrap all the way around the edge and the back. You need something to ream this out with. I find that a Sharpie marker works pretty good. A fat pencil will do the same. And that's just a matter of getting that in there and rubbing it back and forth. Taking your finger and really trying to wrap that fabric all the way around. The 45s in the corner allow it to capture this radius. You will have some little fuzzies and things happening in there. I'll show you how to clean that up with the heat gun in just a second. Same thing here. And once you've got that good and committed and wrapped around best that you can, we'll take the heat gun. And careful not to spend too much time in any one spot. Don't want to burn the fabric. You start warming that up. Once you get it nice and warm, you'll start to see some of that fabric in the fray kind of start to shrink. While it's still hot, go ahead and ream it again. Use your finger to wrap it around. Flip it around to the back side. Do the same on the back. So I'm just heating that up a little bit, melting some of the fray, and getting that to commit to the glue in the back as well. Same thing on the other slot, right here. The heat gun's kind of reactivating the glue, melting the fray of the fabric off, making that nice and clean. So we're going to use the same principles on our buttonholes here. Before we do this, make sure that that's good and depressed in there. Right where the hole is, I want to cut an X with the box cutter. Use Sharpie or something similar to ream that hole out. Same thing. And we'll clean that up with the heat gun. While it's still hot, go ahead and ream it again. Repeat the same thing here. Now while we've got our heat gun hot and running, I like taking the heat gun on all the corners where we have little pieces of fuzz, little pieces of extra fabric. And if you watch closely right here, that'll just kind of melt and disappear. Keeping in mind, you don't want to burn the fabric or melt it too much. As you can see, I'm keeping that heat gun moving. Once you get that nice and warmed up, it'll shrink. And in this way, we can go around and clean up all the edges that we have across the whole product. For example, like right here along the flange, a lot of little fuzzies and things like that happening. We'll just take the heat gun slowly, but keep it moving. It'll melt and seal all the edges. Give it a good heat treat. I find this useful in the corners especially. While it's hot, we can warm this back up a little bit, keep it moving, and really make sure that that's good and committed. Always keep that heat gun moving. Double check these areas, get rid of any little fuzzies. Same thing on this folded seam. We're going to heat it up just a little bit. Really press that down and make sure that's committed. I got fuzzies and a little extra fabric hanging off here in the corner. Once again, heat gun's going to take care of that. Give it a squeeze or a pinch. Go around most all of my edges in this way. Especially on the back side, where we made a bunch of triangle cuts. As you can see, we have little bits of fuzz sticking out. Heat gun's gonna take care of that in just a few passes. And I'm double checking that my fabric is sticking on the back good and have proper adhesion all the way around. Same thing on both sides. That's about it. If you do have any small areas of concern, for example, if you had a little bit of glue bleed out like I did right here, clean that up with just a little bit of alcohol on a clean rag or a stiff brush. If you still have spots that you don't like, if you're using black, you can take a Sharpie marker or any upholstery touch-up marker. Make sure that it matches the color. I always like to do a test on the back side first. If I like it, then I move ahead and make any small touch-ups that I need to do. I like to do a few swipes and then blend it in with either your finger or a piece of cotton or cloth. Got just a little bit more glue bleed out right there, but with the right color marker, shouldn't be a problem. Blends right in. Thanks for watching. We'll go over more later. All right, couple things in the end I want to go over with you. We want this product to last, so it's good to take a couple minutes to go over the whole piece, give it a good inspection, and we want to make sure that this fabric is really glued down to the plastic good. So one way that I like to do that is to take a clean piece of the scrap fabric that we had left over from earlier. Don't use the glued side, but use same fabric on fabric, and really give this a good rub all the way around the piece. Really pressing down hard. Now that it's committed and we know where it is, we want to make it stay there. So taking the same piece of fabric and rubbing over that is really going to help commit all of that down to the plastic. Going into the holes where the hardware goes, going down the folded seam, all around the edges, in the curves, all the way down the flange here. And I'm really applying a lot of pressure. If you have any spots that are not seating down so well, this is the time to get the heat gun out on low. Don't burn your piece here after all of that work. Heat it up just a little bit. Once you got it heated up, use that piece of fabric to really commit it down. I also want to do this all along the edges of the product really good too. Like a lot of things, you'll have problems with wear and tear on the edge, especially with installation and stuff like that. So taking that piece of fabric, really rubbing the edge good, applying a lot of pressure. Got a trouble spot, use the heat gun, warm it up, don't burn it. Take that fabric and rub it on there really good. Make sure it's nice and committed. If you all have any questions about this process or want to talk, please feel free to reach out to us. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your product.